16th, so I'm pretty sure.
Thank you guys so much for coming. For our second guest speaker, Jessica Sinarski. I'm still inviting people, randomly muting people. You guys are great.
If you're not muted, please mute.
17 minus 9 is...
I accidentally muted our guest speaker. I'm sure I can fix that, and once I figure out how to use this thing again. All right, thank you guys so much for coming. Hi, how's it going, Jessica? All right, so before we get started, two things. Tomorrow is the big reveal for the endowment. We're going to kick off the endowment. Keep an eye out for, is that going to be on News Views, Pablo? Is that when, all right, so News Views tomorrow, you guys are going to get a hot link with 4 solid minutes of Pablo talking to you very nicely.
Hey,
he's really great in it.
I got to shout out Alan here because he's the mastermind behind this amazing premiere that you'll see tomorrow. And I can't say how grateful we are for the number of hours you put into this effort. And I think parents, it's going to be fun and informative, and be sure to tune in tomorrow.
And the other date I have to remind you guys about is November 16th at 7 p.m. St. John is holding a stakeholders meeting in Egan Hall, where we will be talking about accreditation, and we will be asking some very hard questions regarding the future of the school, and figuring out the range that we want to answer them. Right, Pablo?
Yeah, come out on the 16th. The meeting is a workshop. We'll be breaking out into small groups and looking at our mission statement, our philosophy, our vision for the next 6 years. And we'd love your input, and we want you to be part of the process. Drop it on the 17th is an all school electronic survey. So if we miss you on the 16th, you'll have an opportunity on the 17th to participate in our self-study survey. And we're hoping for full participation on both fronts. So thank you in advance.
All right. I think that is it. So without further ado, I'm going to pass you guys off to the hostess with the mostest, Sarah Dean.
Thank you. So I'm going to introduce you all to Jessica Sinarski. And Alan, do you want to go ahead and pin us? So we're going to do this kind of interview style, and Jessica and I will be kind of chatting back and forth. I'm going to ask her a handful of questions. And our goal tonight is to get acquainted with where our children might be around their mental health. And some of that as it relates to the pandemic, some of that just as children and mental health was like something that should be talked about. So we're going to go through a handful of topics. As you have questions, you can put them in the chat. If you have a question that you don't want to put in the chat, that doesn't feel comfortable to you, you're welcome to go ahead and message Alan privately via the chat, via the drop-down menu, and then he will hold that question for when we take questions closer to the end. But if you have questions as we're going, feel free to, and you want to put them in the chat publicly, you're welcome to do so. Let me pull my notes over. So I've had the opportunity to interview Jessica. This will be the 3rd time I've gotten to have a great conversation with her. The other 2 times were in the middle of the day. And so while it is 7 o'clock for us and we might be feeling tired, Jessica is so kindly joining us at 10 p.m. East Coast time. So thank you so much, Jessica, for being here at such a late hour. I had to confirm with her multiple times, like, you're sure you're okay with 10 p.m. your time? And she said yes, but I know that is, even if you're a night owl, that's a sacrifice. So we just really appreciate you being here. Let me tell you all about Jessica. So Jessica Sinarski is a highly sought after therapist, author, and speaker. Extensive postgraduate training that she has behind her, with 15 years as a clinician and educator that led her to create the resource and training platform Brave Brains. She makes brain science practical, helping parents and professionals become healers for hurting children. So no matter where your children have been with this pandemic, at some point, they've probably been hurting. And also as parents, we all have as well. Like, this has not been easy on any of us, even though we have days where things, especially right now, I think we're feeling a little bit of hope with children getting vaccinated. But there's been a lot of heavy days. So as we are in our 20th month of a global pandemic, Jessica, This relentless season has really weighed on our kids in ways I think that are visible and definitely not visible. Can you talk about the state of our children's mental health right now?
Absolutely. First, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be spending the evening with you. I am a night owl, but the 10 p.m. thing is hitting my forehead at the moment. So I'm hopeful that everything is coherent, and I really do welcome questions. So feel free to put things in the chat. I know that we'll have a good conversation tonight. So thinking about mental health at the moment, it's interesting to me because I have been talking with people across the country about mental health for years, and the conversation has definitely shifted at this point in the pandemic. Adults are weary, right? Like if you think about especially educators and those who have continued to have to sort of be all in a variety of ways through this entire pandemic. I don't know, parents, where, what that has been for you, but my guess is there's been a lot of double duty, and that's really challenging. We have been enduring a global trauma. And you might have been in a spot where you have the resources to survive, and so that makes it less traumatic. Whenever trauma is not being sure you have the resources to survive, and so this has hit all of us differently. That said, our kids are in developmental stages. No matter what age your children are, they don't have fully formed brains yet. That's humans have an incredibly long path to maturity. And so this global trauma is happening at a time when their brains are still maturing. And so what I think, there are a lot of ways that we could talk about this, but what I think about is not like, I try not to think from a deficit mentality, but what do we need to bolster? What might be a little shaky right now? And so I see the question here, that Jessica's definition of trauma. Trauma is not being sure you have the resources to survive. A working definition of trauma is not being sure you have the resources to survive. And that's part of why developmental trauma, so trauma in childhood, especially related to the home environment, can be so devastating, because kids need their safe big critters. They need their grown-ups to be able to survive. And and so regardless of whether it's been fully traumatic for you and your family or just stressful, that has an impact on some of those foundations of mental health, and certainly of learning. And so I'm going to share my screen for just a minute, because I think this framework is a helpful way of tuning in. So what you're looking at right now are the building blocks for learning it's a well-researched framework for thinking about what makes the learning brain, like what elements are in like, if we're thinking about how adults learn. And so you'll see at the top some of these things that we like to see, right? Self-direction. Curiosity is a funny one to be at the top, because we are actually born with some innate curiosity, but when there's stress, often our curiosity goes down. So as stress goes up, curiosity can kind of shut down, and there's lots of brain reasons that that's the case. Anyway, so civic identity, resilience, agency, academic tenacity, right? We want to see all these things in our kids. Growth mindset, even. Even if you come down to this second to bottom layer, you see executive functions. Executive functions are those planning, organization, memory, time management kinds of things that we absolutely want our kids to be developing. That's pretty low in the foundation of that learning brain. But what I really like to point out is this bottom row of attachment, stress management, and self-regulation. This is what, in ways, we are all struggling with after this 1.5 years plus of a global pandemic, is our attachment relationships, our social supports, that is part of how we navigate being human. Being human is really hard, and we actually need our social supports. We need those buffers in our life that help us navigate this really hard task of being human. Stress management, all of the things that let us manage the stress. And again, when you think about, trauma and resources and stress and how that all fits together, that stress management has probably taken a hit for your family, for you, for your kids. And then one that is really important in this picture is self-regulation. And part of why I highlight self-regulation, so that meaning like being able to, sit in class and pay attention, or manage big feelings, or, just some of those basic, how do I function with myself in a setting? How do I manage my emotions? All those kinds of things. Self-regulation always comes after co-regulation. Always comes after that sort of coming, we need as humans other people to help us calm down, as adults too, but especially as kids. And so I think what I'm seeing, and I think what a lot of educators are seeing and parents are seeing, is that these are a little shaky right now. We're really having to actively work on our attachment relationship, including the act of being able to let go. So, there are a lot of kids who are maybe dealing with some heightened anxiety because they haven't had the hundreds of episodes of practice of leaving parents in the same way that they might have over the past 2 years. And so both of those are an important part of the attachment relationship. So how do we help kids know that they're still close even when they're away, right? That's part of healthy attachment. Stress management, again, we're all working on it. Self-regulation, our kids need a lot of support in this area. Basic things that we think they should know by now, they might not know right now, because that is true for a lot of us. Some of those basic human things people aren't doing right now. We're having to relearn those basic building blocks.
I just lost my notes.
Oh, that's okay.
When you went from screen share, my notes completely went away.
Oh no. So I think we were going to go to navigating some of the big hard feelings.
Yeah. So I have my notes back now. So can you talk about whether we're in a pandemic or not? And you referenced big hard feelings. So whether we're in a pandemic or not, I think we can all agree that our kids are always and often susceptible to big hard feelings. And so I think that different layers of the pandemic have brought that up, and in different ways. There's been like new and different triggers that we've been very unfamiliar, like having to learn to deal with old things in new ways.
Mm-hmm.
But can you talk about how we can help our kids navigate big, hard feelings, whether it's like right now or in general? And I know you have, so Jessica came on my podcast and we talked about her book. Is it What's in Your Backpack? Did I get that title right?
What's Inside Your Backpack.
What's Inside Your Backpack. And this was a great book for early reader or younger children, although the skills are amazing for any age children, to talk about managing big feelings and awareness of big feelings. And what I loved about that book, and I think which would be really valuable to touch on here, is not only is it talking about helping kids navigate big, hard feelings, but it's also as a community recognizing that everyone's navigating big, hard feelings. And, this is true at all times. We all, there's always people who are getting through everyday life, managing things that we know nothing about. But I think this is even more paramount right now. So can you talk about big, hard feelings with our kids? And then also that compassion piece around acknowledging that sometimes when we see our friends having a hard time, they're managing big, hard feelings, and we might not be aware of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'm actually going to go back even a little further in the books that I've written, to a book called Riley the Brave, where I introduce some of the so the challenging thing for us is some of the same things that can keep us alive in stressful situations. Will get us.
Oh, hold on.
I'm
My
back.
fault. My
That's
fault.
okay.
Go ahead.
No worries. And I think the more that we understand our brains, the easier this all becomes. And so I'm gonna teach you just a super user-friendly way of thinking about the brain that impacts everything I see and do, and hopefully becomes a way that we can start to think about ourselves. We can teach this to our kids. We can help our kids think about where they are in their brains, and that also gives some empathy for people who might not be functioning their best, might be really struggling. So wherever you are, I know most of you have your screens off, which is fine, but I want you to hold up your hand and fold over your thumb and make a fist. So this is your brain. So your fingers are this prefrontal cortex, your big the human upstairs brain that does all those things like executive function and all those things we saw in the pyramid. That's all happening in your upstairs brain. And then if you open your hand, you at the bottom of your hand, you can think of that as the downstairs brain. So you might have heard of like the limbic system, or it's really all the way down into your brain stem, right? So this is your spine, right? Going down the back of your neck. This is your downstairs brain. Downstairs brain is home of all of the big feels, all the survival instincts and the primal rage and terror, and the things our brains flip to in, when we think of being triggered, that's our brain sort of flipping to that fight or flight, or even deeper in a more protective primitive system is that freeze response. Like, I'm going to protect by freezing and just getting through this terrible thing. So we have our fight and flight, freeze, big feelings kind of things happening in this downstairs brain. And your thumbnail is your amygdala. So the amygdala is that gatekeeper. It's the alarm system. So every signal that comes into our body, into our brains, through all of our senses. So, hearing the rustle in the room next door, or if your kids are making noise, next to you, or the computer's buzzing, or the lights are flickering, whatever is happening, all of those signals are hitting your amygdala. And your amygdala is deciding in milliseconds, is this safe enough? Am I safe? That's your amygdala's primary question. Am I safe enough to be calm and curious and think things through and use all of these amazing functions of my upstairs brain? Or panic, alarm. I need to be on. So in the Riley the Brave series, I introduced these things, those downstairs brain moments, as in an animal form. So thinking about porcupine moments or tiger moments or turtle moments that we can all relate to, whether we've had trauma or not, we all have those kinds of moments. And I think giving a brain-based framework for, it doesn't have to be tiger and turtle moments, but really starting to think from that perspective, teaching your kids about their brains and having language at home, like, you know what, I'm flipping into my downstairs brain, or I don't want to have a tiger moment, so I'm going to take a breather so that I don't yell at you, or, oh my goodness, where are we in our brains today? Let's see how we can get back into our upstairs brains. Those are all really non-shaming ways to address what's actually going on in the room, to really to acknowledge big feelings without getting stuck in them. And so that, we could talk about big feelings for days. It's where I live and breathe, both at home and in my professional work. But I think just having that brain-based perspective can really shift the narrative and shift the tone, and give you and your family some tools to deal with all of these things that have been taxing our brains, because the 24-hour news cycle, the pandemic, all of these things are sending danger signals to that amygdala. And so I feel like the whole world is like this, if not fully flipped all the time. And so it really does take some effort, both within and with each other, to send signals of safety to each other, to be able to be in our upstairs brains ourselves and with each other.
When our kids are in that space of
Yeah.
being in their downstairs brain and we are having a hard time, I love the objectivity of labeling it that way. I think that's great. So is there a coping skill or tool that we could offer that would also help shift them out of that?
Ever so many. So I think one of the things that, I mean, again, we could talk about a lot of things. So I got to decide which direction I want to go here. So one of the things that comes to mind is play is so powerful. I know, Sarah, we were going to talk about this a little bit later, but I'm just going to bring it in now. That you have a power tool that I never knew was going to be so important as a parent. When we play is one of the most powerful ways to get that upstairs brain back online. So, and I don't mean like, let's play checkers. I mean, just that lighthearted spirit of being, like, not taking ourselves too seriously. When your kid is starting to flip, or when they're fully flipped, like, just even in your animated response to them, oh my goodness, what is happening? Let's see. You were going to put your shoes on and now you're in a ball on the floor. How did we get here? Right? Like, pulling it, if we can stay in our upstairs brain when we use that playful spirit. I think of it also because one of the most powerful ways that our kids learn to build that connection is through the adults that they see around them. So the more that we can bring our calm, connected brain and body to the situation, the better chance our kids are going to be able to get their upstairs brain online. So if we're expecting them to just go use a coping skill, as they get older, in high school, sure, that happens. But when you're really upset, Sarah, do you just want to be told to go handle your business? Or does it help sometimes to be able to work that out with somebody? Not that that's always going to be possible, but
right. Yeah.
Right. Like,
helps.
we need each other. And so that's where I think, again, playfulness can be so helpful, because we don't have to take ourselves so seriously. I'll sing the answer. If I feel my lid flipping, I'll bust into song. You don't want to go to bed, but it's time to go to bed, and I don't want to yell at you. Like, it doesn't have to be a pretty song. Just anything that lets you stay in your upstairs brain helps your kids find that upstairs brain again. Play isn't the only tool. So there's lots of ways that we can be really intentional about, oh man, that lid is flipping, or gosh, your feelings are getting so big. With your older kids, when they do have more of those cognitive abilities, we're actually going to go through a few really concrete strategies that you can model and teach that can be really helpful, both in preventing some of those big flips and also in the moment when things start to feel pretty overwhelming.
So I'm curious if other parents of children, maybe up to like 5th grade or whatever, were thinking about having their kids put their shoes on in the morning. And they were with your example of like being playful, instead of for the 18th time being like, why do you not have your shoes on?
Mm-hmm.
Which is where I go when we are supposed to be out the door 3 minutes ago to go to that play. That's such a helpful reminder. We have a question, a private message question. What does playfulness look like for 13 and 14-year-olds who will just roll their eyes when you're singing to them?
So that's a great question. There are a lot of directions this can go, but you can even use that. So the eye roll is a great example. You can even be playful with the eye roll in ways that let you not take it personally. I'm not saying you do take it personally, but I know that's my tendency, is is that all behavior suddenly feels personal, even though it has nothing to do with me. And so even with the eye roll, you can be like, wait, can you get up higher? I didn't hear you. Your eyes were really trying to tell me something, but I'm not sure I understood what they were trying to tell me. Like you have to know the kid and whether or not they can handle that. You don't want them to think you're making fun of them, because that's, there's a fine line between playfulness and sarcasm as kids get older. But playfulness with older kids can also just, it might start to get a little more subtle. So it might be little looks, or even just that little like elbow nudge about something, or shared inside jokes that, pay attention when you have a giggle with your teenager, because that can be something that brings you together again in the future. I was talking with a mom who her son was getting ready for his driver's test, and he was super nervous, just this big bundle of nerves, and they were walking to meet the instructor or test whatever person. This is my words now at 10:30 at night. Test whatever person. And he looked like straight out of Top Gun, like aviator glasses and like the whole thing. And they both just cracked up laughing, not at him in a mean way, but like to each other, because this was happening. And so that became this sweet little inside joke between them. So when he was studying for the SATs and starting to get sort of bogged down and in his downstairs brain, she would blast music from Top Gun on Alexa or whatever. It's silly and little, but though it's those moments that help feed that upstairs brain. And for the singing, I had another parent that I was working with that we'd talked about the power of song, and she would sing opera in a way that, and her kids hated it, and so she would do like, I'm going to sing until you start your homework, you have the power to make me stop singing, and they would roll their eyes, but then they'd go start their homework because she would be silly and sing until they did. And it just adds that little bit of levity that helps everyone stay in their upstairs brain. And movement, I should say too. When you asked about getting out of the downstairs brain, I have a colleague who's like, kids are a little bit like plants, where, give them water, give them some sunlight. Like there are times that we just need to move our bodies a little bit. We need to walk it off, or we need to go get a snack, or we need to do something physical. We need to do some jumping jacks or sit on a bouncy ball for a while or something, to get that upstairs brain back online. That can be another powerful tool for you.
I will fully admit that there was times when we were in our months of virtual learning that I would drag my child out of the house, both of us near tears, and be like, we're going running, and we're not stopping until we're laughing. And it would be like a block. And yeah. It was like both of us were so angry walking out the door. And then within a block, we were like laughing. It was totally fine. And that became like our go-to, because it was totally like we had to redirect the energy. And I'm sure that was a potentially familiar situation to other parents during that time, that like where you're just like butting heads and there's nowhere to go. And you've been in the house for 1 million days in a row.
Right. You're both here. But
yes.
If we can discharge that energy a little bit and find some playfulness again. Yeah. We're on the same team. We're on the same team.
Yes.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about anxiety and childhood anxiety. And can you talk about what that looks like? I think that in the context of the pandemic, I'm guessing it's more prevalent. I also think there's a beautiful outcome of the pandemic is that we are talking so much more about mental health. So maybe we're just talking more openly about this, but I think that anxiety can look like a lot of different things in adults, but I am imagining in children, it's an even broader spectrum. And I know that I've been in conversations with many parents who have concerns about their children and anxiety during this time. Can you talk about what anxiety looks like in kids, and then how can we support our children if they're seeming anxious?
Sure. You are absolutely right. Anxiety can look like a lot of different things. It can look grumpy. It can look stressed. It can look shut down. It can look even sort of hyperactive and bouncing off the walls. Like all of that all of that can be anxiety. A helpful way to think about anxiety is, for me, anxiety in a lot of ways is that amygdala getting extra protective. So it's the amygdala sending danger signals when maybe there's not danger. So that can come in the form of tests or leaving mom, leaving home to go to school, or stuff with friends. Especially, so much has been navigated online, and now we're figuring out social cues again, not in front of a screen, and all of that's tricky. I think a lot of adults are struggling with that. Like, how do I people? Like, what? How does this go?
Yes.
I don't remember. I have to wear pants. Like, I have pajama pants on right now. So,
Right.
If we're in person, then you're gonna see that, and I need to do something different. So, I think if we can help our kids understand, like, oh, false alarm, like catch some of those false alarms to say, oh, you're getting a danger signal. Let's check here. Are things dangerous, or what can we do that helps give your brain some safety signals in this situation? So if your kiddo's struggling with separation, one of the things that I've heard from a lot of people has been really helpful from the second Riley the Brave book is this thing called a love mark. So it's just a little way of staying connected even when you're far apart. And I would think of it more with younger kids, but there are a fair few tweens and teens that have found it helpful as well, where you both take a marker in the morning and draw like a little mark, maybe on your wrist or arm or something, that for each other. So you draw it on your kid and they draw it on you. And then that becomes that safety point, that thing that they can say to their amygdala, I'm safe. We're, I'm going to see dad after school, or whenever it is. It's also really helpful if your kids are maybe navigating two homes, if you're co-parenting with somebody that you don't live with. It's another way to navigate that transition between, as we're thinking about helping kids hold complex, this complex thing that both of these homes are my homes, and both of these parents love me, and I can sort of hold that going back and forth. You might want to use a permanent marker if you're doing it over days, as opposed to just until the end of the school day. Just little ways to say to the amygdala, we're good, I got you. That I also think it's empowering for kids when they know it's their brain trying to be protective. So I feel that as an adult, when my anxiety kicks up, I can say, okay, thank you, gut, for telling me that I'm nervous about this. I got it though. I appreciate that heads up that this is a big deal. I hear you that this is a big deal, and I'm okay. I got this. That can be helpful.
I like it. Thank you. I want to talk about empowering tools that you have. You have a surprising parenting power tool that nurtures healthy brain development. Can you share the secret?
So I spilled it already. So play is your parenting power tool. And I will say, though, we have to have some play and joy in our lives to be able to give that to our kids. Go ahead.
Well, can I just interject that maybe there has been a lack of play and joy in our lives in the last 20 months. It's been a little hard to come by.
Right? So I realized, I shared these things that we can do to be playful with our kids, but I want to encourage all of you on the call tonight. You need it for yourself. And I say that as an invitation, not like you're doing something wrong because you haven't been playing. It's normal when we have more stressors, that upstairs brain is tired. And so we're not, I've heard from so many people, like, I didn't realize I forgot how to play, or I stopped playing at some point. So even silly things like having a text thread with some friends where you send funny gifts to each other, or, maybe you're feeling so energetic that you can arrange a game night with adults, or maybe it's calling that friend where you end up in tears and laughter, or maybe it's watching a comedy, a comedy show with your partner, or like there are lots of ways that we can get play back into our lives. It doesn't have to be this big profound thing, but
although it does seem like it needs to be
important.
more intentional than it used to be. Like you do have to
Yes.
really be like, oh wait, like have I done anything fun in 3 months? Like, and then really
Yes.
look at, oh, I need to schedule some fun because I have like, it's easy to just continue in this season that we're in, not paying attention or not recognizing that we haven't had that.
Right. We get in survival mode, and our brains need it too. Like that's part of how we can stay in it with our kids and in it with our jobs and in it, in doing this really hard human thing in the midst of a lot of outside danger and pressure and things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a question, a private question I'm going to pull up here in just a second. Before I do that, we're going to shift into resiliency in just a moment for our parents listening in. If you have a question up to this point, go ahead and pop it in the chat, or you can send it to Alan, and then we'll address that now. We'll do a little Q&A now, and then we'll shift into resiliency, and then we'll do some Q&A on the back end of that as well. So if you have any questions for anything up to this point. So the question that I have here is, can you speak to social anxiety in kids, tweens, and how to address it as they're spending more time with people, again, in particular, all the rules in COVID and masks, et cetera?
So yes, you're not alone, and and it is tricky. I think again about, as we're going back to those building blocks that there were, so I don't want to be in that deficit mentality of like missed opportunities. That was what I was going to say, but that was not kids' reality. Like there are so many little social cues, little things that we learn as we pass each other in the halls, as there are little conversations by the locker. Like all of these moments along the way are really teaching us things. They're part of how kids are putting together their schema for how the world works, and especially how the world works as an awkward tween. I think we can all acknowledge that that was a really hard time, and so to have had a shared experience that is so different than most generations before us is really challenging. And we can say that out loud, and we can also acknowledge that we have to actively teach some of those things that might have been sort of absorbed in a different way over months and months, and that your kid's not the only one that's having to actively learn that we're all in the same boat in that sense, but to not be afraid to. It's tricky, right? Because they're getting to that age when they don't want you to tell them anything. And so maybe it's finding ways to, there's a show that you watch together or something, and there are little things that you can talk about in how the characters are interacting or things like that let you talk about it without talking about it. Some of those kinds of things can be really helpful in that age group. And I think acknowledging for your tween, as you're driving, don't sit them down and look at them in the eye and have this conversation, but just when you're out for a walk, or when you're driving to school, or in these moments when there's less eye contact, so it's less scary, have those little conversations around some of those softer social skills and how everyone's learning it, and it is sort of awkward. And and I guess the question was specifically about social anxiety. So I think speaking specifically to, we've been in this time period where people were dangerous. People were the spreaders of this disease. And that is very confusing from a brain perspective. Like it broke my heart as I would be walking in the neighborhood, and all of my natural instincts to signal safety were not safe. Right. And so we are so I think just saying that out loud to our kids, that we have sort of been learning this way of social distancing and masking and, don't touch and don't handshake and don't do all these things, that we are going to actively have to learn again our nervous system, our brain and body are going to have to learn again how to how to hug or handshake or, be close without that knee jerk, oh shoot, I might kill someone's grandma. Like that,
Right.
it was super intense. It has been
Yeah.
super intense. And so we do have this like conflicting thing that we can just be sort of explicit about in a roundabout sort of way with our tweens.
Thank you. Let's shift into resiliency.
Yes.
So you have, I mean, there's, if we've become nothing in this 20 months, it's been nothing but resiliency that we've been practicing building. So you have 5 practical resilience building strategies for kids. Can you share those?
I do. Yeah. And I like visuals sometimes, so I'm going to share my screen again just to mix it up a little bit for you. So if my screen, hold on, here we go. So the first that I will share, it might sound like seriously this again, but there is a reason that the breath has been part of culture's coping strategies for millennia, literally millennia, because the breath is one of the most powerful ways that we can send safety signals to our brain and body. And so let's actually just do it here tonight. So put one hand on your chest and one hand on your belly. It's a nice time to be gentle with yourself, whatever you find at your belly. Just give it a little rub and say, thank you, belly. And you can have your eyes open or closed. And we're just going to take 3 big, deep breaths. We're going to breathe in and a long breath out. And in and out. One more time, all the way into your belly. Biggest breath you've taken all day. And all the way out until you don't think you can squeeze any more air out of your lungs. And then notice how you feel. Do you feel maybe, I don't know, Sarah, what do you notice when you take a few deep breaths?
That I've not taken a deep breath all day long.
Right? I love having this in my presentations because I'm always like, oh yeah, drop the shoulders, let the air go to your belly, right?
Yeah. Like whenever I do something like this, I'm like, do I hold my breath 50% of the time, like 24/7 or 50% of the way 24/7?
Yes, we do. And so does it have to be like stopping and breathing like that for 30 seconds or 60 seconds? It doesn't have to be. Even you can have, there's so many ways to build this into your routine. Any way that you can get kids breathing, especially that long out breath, is helpful for their brain and body. You can make it playful. So like I have this little Hoberman sphere that I use with kids where they can visually see and imagine their lungs getting bigger and smaller. You can make it little things like when you're driving, when you see I don't know, a certain sign or whatever, that's your cue to take a big deep breath. You can build it into your bedtime routines, whatever it takes. There's tons of apps. So for older kids, even for younger kids, but for older kids, if they don't want to hear it from you because you're the, parents that don't know anything, Stop, Breathe, Think. I think it has a different name now, actually. I can't remember what it's called, but if you look it up, you'll be able to find it. And Smiling Mind are 2 that are really helpful and free. So yeah, anything you can do to get your breath going, that is it. It's gotten a lot of press, but for good reason, because it really does send safety signals and help clear the mind. So that's number 1. Number 2, we got to go like speed round now. Okay. So number 2, check the facts. So this requires a little bit more of your upstairs brain to be online. And so this is sometimes where it can be helpful to do it with someone else. I know sometimes I need somebody else's help to help me see, is this actually this catastrophic thing that I'm feeling like it is, or is this is this a solvable problem? And so that can look as simple as, slowing down for a minute and checking in with, let's see, does the fact that, so with your kiddo, does the fact that that person didn't like your post or call you back or text back right away, does that mean that they don't like you and that you're a social pariah? Or does it maybe mean that they could have had something else going on? Or like, there are just so many ways that our brains get extra protective, and we want to project the negative, that if we can slow down and check the facts on the situation, we have a better shot at entering, being different in relationships and all of those kinds of things. Imagine with hope. I feel like it's speed round. All right. Number 3. Imagine with hope. So
this will keep the energy up as it gets to be 11
that's
o'clock
right.
your time.
Okay. So I heard someone say, I don't know where the quote came from originally, but that worry is a poor use of our imagination, because worry is really imagining with fear, right? Worry wants us to imagine all of the worst possibilities that can happen. And so one of the ways that we can sort of train our brains and pull back into our upstairs brain is when we feel ourselves going down that rabbit trail of, oh my gosh, the world is ending about this, that we can come back to, okay, what could this look like? Maybe it's, what could this look like in an hour? What could it look like in a day or a month or 3 months? And really imagine it. Really imagine that positive outcome. So maybe, those of you who are hanging in there, even though your kids are probably getting rowdy in the background, is there something that's stressful for you right now? And can you take a moment to set it aside? Imagine with hope how that might look different in a day or a week or a month. There is power in that. We in this country, especially, I feel like in white America, there is a tendency to have this sort of pull yourself up by your bootstraps. It's not okay to ask for help. We're not, this sort of individualized instead of community sense. And let me just break that myth wide open, because asking for help is part of building resilience. So we won't talk about it today, but if you've ever heard of the Adverse Childhood Experiences study, the ACEs study, we now have lots of data that says that positive childhood experiences, especially relationships with at least one adult, is protective in those, against some of those stressors. We need safe big critters. We need each other. And so when you ask for help, when your kids ask for help, that is actually an upstairs brain thing. That is a resilience builder for them. And then I feel like a lot of my work is helping people hold complexity. And that has really been brought to the forefront in the last 20 months, that things are not simple. And so we can feel 2 things at once. We can feel anxious and be brave. Those 2 coexist often. You can have really challenging situations in your life. Maybe there was some really hard stuff that happened during the pandemic, or maybe your kiddo is dealing with learning differences or other things that sort of weigh them down. That is true, and that's not the end of the story. So what we want to do is keep going with the end of the story. So I have I don't know, I was going to give a personal example, and then that felt too far to go at almost 11 o'clock at night. So whatever it is, whatever your scenario is, to hold both, that you have these challenging things, or your kiddo is struggling with anxiety and they are strong and courageous, and you're on the same team and you're getting the help that you need. And that's good. That's helpful. That's part of building resilience, and being human is holding that complexity. So believe it or not, just acknowledging that, telling yourself the whole story is part of building resilience. Speed
Love
round.
it. Nice. So good. Okay, I have another question for you. So as we just wrap up that resiliency round, if you all have questions related to that or anything else that's come up, go ahead, pop them in the chat or send them over to Alan. So the next question I have for you is, you said you don't want to have a deficit mentality when talking about the situation. As a frontline mental health expert, though, is there a positive way you can you prefer to frame this when a kid or maybe even an adult is feeling down about living through a pandemic?
So that's a good question. My sensitivity, I think, to the deficit mentality is I I hear a lot about like learning loss or things like that that I think can add to anxiety instead of helping us actually achieve what we're trying to achieve. I will say though, it is important to acknowledge what is true. You know, this has been really hard. We are living through a global pandemic. None of us have ever done that before, right? And so it feels hard because it is hard. So that is an important piece to acknowledge. And sometimes we have to grieve through that. And, you know, there are all kinds of pieces of that are important to acknowledge. I think my sensitivity to the deficit mentality in particular is around it paralyzing us, right? Or getting us in this like, my kid will never catch up, you know, we're doomed because of this, that we're going to hold the whole story. So yes, this still is really hard. You know, my youngest, his poor little face is all broken out and rashy all the time because of the mask. Not that that's the end all be all, but it's just one of those visual reminders of, oh geez, you are still wearing a mask for 8 hours a day, you know, 20 months into this, and that's really hard. As silly as that little thing is, you know, he's reminding dad to get his COVID vaccine appointment because he's ready to be done with this. So I think that is a good question, that we don't have to deny the reality, but we don't have to stay stuck there either. And I think there's power in recognizing that we're all going through this. And so all of our kids, you know, if you have an 8th grader right now, 8th graders across the country, around the world, have all been navigating this awkwardly. And you know, I will be interested to see what the relearning looks like. I will be, you know, I know that there's going to be, or I imagine there will be proms for the, you know, the class of 2020 in 5 years or what. Like, I think there are ways that we will reclaim or reinvent some of the changes that we've all experienced, because it's very hard.
Yes. Yes. Do you have any suggestions for like how we can, this is the both alluding to the both, and like how as parents we can stay positive and upbeat when we feel overwhelmed ourselves by kind of like the loss and the grief of the last 20 months?
Yeah. So I think the first step is to acknowledge the loss and the grief of the last 20 months, and let yourself hold the whole story, that you have lost things in this time period. And some of you may have lost big things, but you know, some of you may have lost people, or not been able to have a proper funeral, or not been able to transition, or maybe the losses feel insignificant in the scheme of things. All 3 of my books came out during the pandemic. So, you know, it's a silly thing. It feels much less severe than that, but losing some of those points of connection and being able to talk with people and meet with people, that really, it was an impact. Whether, you know, family reunions that were missed and all of those kinds of things. truly grieving those things is part of moving on. And so that might mean writing it all out. It might mean taking a minute, taking an hour to physically write down the things that shifted or were left behind. And what you might find as you do that is that there are some things that emerge that came from it, and that don't have to shut down the feeling of loss. We can acknowledge that feeling of loss and hold maybe some of those beautiful moments that we found, that we had a time to connect with our kid in a different way, even though there were lots of times of arguing and needing to go for a run so that you didn't strangle each other. But there were also sweet little moments that you wouldn't have had. Not to sugarcoat, not to silver lining the pain, but to truly hold both. Maybe it's actually having a little ceremony as a family of things that you missed, or making it concrete and lighting candles, or tearing things up and burying them. Like, it might sound over the top, but those things, there's a reason that we have ceremonies for losses, and we're all dealing with a lot of ambiguous loss, which is a lot harder to conceptualize. And so making it tangible, writing it down, giving an object a special meaning, those things matter when you're dealing with ambiguous loss.
Absolutely. Any other questions for Jessica? We have 2 minutes. If there's anything else you need, pop it in the chat. I'm going to ask you, Jessica, to share your books. I want to, one of the things that I actually reached out to you after you sent me what's in your backpack, and I was commenting on the way that you approached the art and the way that you approached approach representation. I loved the book, but I loved also how thoughtful it was when it came to representation. So I just want to that's a big deal at our school, and it's definitely a focus for our school. And I want to just really spend a second acknowledging that piece. Can you tell us about all the books though? And then also kind of what's the age range for the books? Because I think that
Sure,
while they look like they're younger books, they're absolutely appropriate, I think, for a wide age range.
Thank you, Sarah. So what's inside your backpack? You heard Sarah mention it's a natural fit for 3rd to 5th graders. But like Sarah was saying, the concepts extend beyond that. So, it just sort of depends on the person. Riley the Brave is, again, it's probably more of a natural fit for your preschool to 2nd, 3rd grade, but some of the most profound stories have come from teens and adults who saw themselves in the pages, because it tells the story of a little bear cub who used to be brave like a turtle and brave like a porcupine and brave like a tiger, and now he's learning new ways to be brave, and that really resonates with a lot of people and gives some language for big heavy feelings. So, and these two have pretty extensive afterwords that are super helpful for grown-ups of all walks of life. Riley the Brave Makes It to School has some really concrete tools for parents and kids, especially I would say kindergarten, pre-K, kindergarten first seems to be the sweet spot where, especially if your kid's dealing with some anxiety or grumpiness, anxiety sometimes comes out as grumpiness, that can be a helpful one for that age range. And then this is where you can find me on social media, and there's lots of free resources on both rileythebrave.org and bravebrains.com.
Thank you, Jessica. Can I ask you one last question that just popped into the chat?
Yes.
So you mentioned, whoa, where'd my screen go? You mentioned the suggestion of marking that on the hand, which we've done that before when I've traveled for work, and it's brilliant. So do you, the question was, do you have any other ideas for helping kids feel safe? Do you have another tool you could provide?
So like particularly with separation, or
Jen, do you want to unmute and comment on that, Jen, so that we make sure that you're getting what you need?
Sure, that sounds great. Separation sounds good.
Around separation. I think so. little rituals are super helpful. Depending, can you give me an age that you're thinking of?
Tween.
Tween. Okay. So I would say acknowledging that brain is given a danger signal and that that's normal and understandable, and will be reunited. Sometimes it can be helpful to have, if it's not a little mark on the wrist. I know some families in the tween teen age find it helpful to have, like, maybe it's a certain bracelet or that you and your child have, or like a special stone or something that they keep in their pocket. Those kinds of things can be helpful. It can also be like having little touch points where maybe at a certain point in the day you send a message, or I don't know what the device situation is, but even just some of those little things where if you're still at work but they're getting home from school, that you've left a note for them somewhere, like any little touch points can be helpful for that, continuing that message of, we come back. I think about, we're trying to think about how to have the tween version of what I talked about with my kids when they were little, that mommy always comes back. I know, I'll miss you. I'll see you after school. Mommy always comes back. Mommy comes back. Like we want to have more grown-up ways of communicating that, basically.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Jessica, thank you so much. We will let you go to bed now. This was incredible. Everyone has links to all of your stuff here in the chat so people can follow up with Jessica, check out her website, check out her resources. Thank you so much for being here. We so appreciate you taking the time. Bernadette, I see you waving your hand. Did you want to say something?
No, just thank you.
Oh.
And thank you, Sarah and Alan, for organizing tonight. I have taken notes all over my newspaper here.
Oh, and Jessica, meet Bernadette, our principal.
Yay. I'm so glad, Bernadette. Thank you for having me.
No, it's wonderful. Thanks, Sarah. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you, Jessica. And thank you all for being here. Good night.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Night.